What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 40K Cafe. And you're right, Old Ironside. How could I ever forget about the Anchorite? The Anchorite is a wordbearer's dreadnought that went from being a loyalist to traitor to loyalist once again. His history would begin as early as the Imperium discovering Lorgar. In fact, he would be one of the first aspirants ever taken from cultists to be inducted into the Wordbearers. So one can imagine, as starting as early as they did with the Wordbearers, they would eventually follow them down, embracing the Chaos Gods and all the heretical beliefs that they did. And that was the case for the Anchorite. He was there pre-heresy, experienced Monarchia, all of the Horus heresy, and eventually even the Battle of Calth. But you see, it was here at the Battle of Calth where things began to change for the Anchorite. At the Battle of Calth, the Anchorite would come to the understanding that although Monarchia had absolutely crippled the Wordbearers and everything that they stood for, they weren't destroyed utterly. Instead, they were made stronger for it and became a much more powerful legion, and that is indisputable. He then immediately came to the understanding that where Monarchia would bolster the Wordbearers, Calth will then bolster the Ultramarines. He understood that this would then lead to a vicious cycle of never-ending warfare, bloodshed, and hatred, and in immediate conclusion, he would decide to end it himself by surrendering to the Ultramarines. And this is almost where his story would end for the rest of the Horus Heresy up until the Siege of Terra. In his cell during the Siege of Terra, the Anchorite would pray for his legion, seeking redemption for all that they had done. And amidst this time period, demons of the warp would come to him with temptations of old and promises of dark powers. Yet the Anchorite would double down, continuing his prayer, his own self-isolation and penance, and banish the demons, even seeking the worship of the God Emperor himself once again. This is when he would pick up the name that we would come to identify him as the Anchorite. He would pick up the teachings of the Lectitio Divinitatis, even practicing teaching them to the ecclesiarchy themselves. Even in his penance, he would become a guiding light for the Imperium. But despite everything that he had done for the Imperium and his assistance in guiding them to the Emperor of Mankind, he believed that all of his life was still stained with his sins for the actions of his brothers. This sin, he believed, could only be cleansed by the sacrifice of his own life. And he would make this attempt. In fact, he would make the attempt several times. Yet each attempt was made with failure, and in his last attempt, he would be interned into a contemptor dreadnought. As a dreadnought, he would continue his teachings amidst the ecclesiarchy and the Imperium, continuing all of this through his self-imposed isolation. That is until eventually one of his traitorous wordbearer brothers would discover the existence of the Anchorite's survival. Upon the discovery of their long-lost brother, the traitorous wordbearers would attempt to seize the Anchorite and bring him back to their long-lost traitorous kin. Forces would be dispatched to defend the Anchorite, and even though the Wordbearers would come in contact with him, the Anchorite vowed to never return to that life or his traitorous legion. Despite previously swearing to never take up arms again, the Anchorite would partake in the battle and fend off the Wordbearers. In the final battle, the Anchorite would even lose an arm while fighting his brothers. But despite this, he would press on his assault, all while shouting litanies of the Lectitio Divinitatis. Once the Chaos forces were defeated, the Anchorite would go back into self-isolation for the remainder of his life. And to this day, this is where he remains. You can read about the Anchorite in the novel Apocalypse. The novel is a great read, very fun, and pretty short. But with that being said, thanks again guys for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Drop a comment if there's anything you guys want to hear about next, and as always, remember to follow for more.